Turquoise Ridge is a Nevada gold vein worth over $1 billion a year. For most of the 20th century, nobody could touch it. Drive past it on the highway and you'd see sagebrush, a cattle fence, and a dirt turnoff with no sign. Nothing here says gold, and this ridge held that secret since the 1880s. Prospectors dug into it hunting silver and tungsten and walked away empty. Today, this single Nevada complex pulls more gold out of the ground each year than most entire countries produce. So how did over a century of American miners miss $1 billion deposit, and how much of it is still down there? To understand how, you have to go back to the men who found this ground and had no idea what they were actually standing on. The Osgood Mountains rise out of empty high desert in the northern part of the state, a low, dry range with no particular reputation, roughly 70 miles from the nearest sizable town. In the 1880s, the first prospectors working these hills weren't looking for gold at all. They were digging for silver, copper, and lead, ordinary base metals in a belt of altered rock at the edge of a granite stock. In 1916, they found tungsten in that same ground and mined it in fits and starts for decades, mostly to feed wartime demand. Somewhere in between, a local rancher dug a 10-foot pit into a strange bleached outcrop nearby and had the rock assayed. It came back worth about $11 a ton, barely worth the shovel. He filled it back in and moved his cattle on. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. In 1933, in the middle of the Depression, two broke prospectors from Winnemucca named Edward Knight and Emmett Chase were working those same hills when they found something the rancher had missed: real gold in real quantity. They had no capital and no equipment, just a claim and a hunch. So they brought it to Noble Getchell, a Nevada state senator whose last mining venture was already going under. Getchell believed them, but he didn't have the money to develop it either. He turned to his friend George Wingfield, a banker who had made his own fortune in Nevada's earlier gold booms, and Wingfield picked up the phone to Bernard Baruch, one of the most powerful financiers on Wall Street. A 10-foot prospect pit that had already failed once had just been financed by a circle of millionaires. But the gold Knight and Chase found was only the easy gold, oxidized ore near the surface, simple to crush and simple to process. The rock underneath it was hiding something far bigger. And that part, no amount of Wall Street money could dig out, not yet. Here's the problem nobody could solve for the next 50 years. As the Getchell mine went deeper, geologists kept confirming more gold down there, but not gold you could just wash out with a cyanide tank. This gold was refractory, locked in microscopic form inside pyrite and carbon-rich sulfide rock, sealed off so tightly that even flooding it with cyanide barely touches it. Picture gold dust sealed inside millions of tiny stone capsules scattered through solid rock. That's roughly what 19th and 20th century engineers were up against. Standard processing doesn't just work slower on ore like that, it barely works at all. In the 1970s, a company called Conoco leased the property, drilled hundreds of holes, and confirmed there were serious reserves sitting down there. Reserves in excess of 750,000 ounces by one later estimate, then filed them away in the report as metallurgically difficult. That's industry language for, we found it and we still can't get it out. So the deposit that had made a Wall Street financier rich in the 1930s sat there for another half-century, its biggest gold still sealed inside rock nobody could crack. 750,000 ounces confirmed on paper, and still worth nothing to anyone. The next twist wouldn't come from a lucky strike at all. 6 decades after Knight and Chase, geologists working for the mine's newest owner, a company then called First Mississippi Gold, drilled beneath the old open pit chasing a structural fault line rather than a hunch, and hit something the original miners never even knew existed. A second, much larger ore body, sitting hundreds of feet underground, mapped out through structural geology instead of stumbled onto by chance. In 1991, they confirmed it. By 1996, company geologists had published the formal discovery paper for the industry to read. They named the new ore body Turquoise Ridge. Finding it was the easy part. Getting the gold out of it was not. The fix, when it finally came, wasn't a better drill or a bigger crew. It was chemistry. In 1987, the mine's owners approved construction of a new mill built around autoclave technology. essentially giant pressure vessels that cook crushed ore under intense heat, added oxygen and heavy pressure until the sulfide minerals break apart and release the gold trapped inside them, all before the ore ever reaches a cyanide tank. The mill started up in 1989, processing about 3,000 tons of ore a day. That same basic process, scaled up and modernized, still runs this complex today through what's now called the Sage Autoclave. For the first time, ore that 19th century prospectors had literally stepped over and that 20th century engineers had written off as too difficult could finally be processed at industrial scale. Underground mining at the new Turquoise Ridge ore body itself began in 1998, and it never really stopped. By the end of 2019 alone, this one underground mine had already produced somewhere around 6.8 million ounces of gold since it started. Gold that, without a pressure vessel cooking the rock apart first, would have simply stayed locked in the ground, invisible and worthless. Once that door opened, this stopped being a marginal old claim in the desert and became one of the richest gold complexes in America. And it hasn't slowed down since. As of 2026, it's known as the Turquoise Ridge Complex, operated by Nevada Gold Mines, a joint venture formed in July 2019 between Barrick, which runs the operation and holds 61.5%, and Newmont, which holds the rest. Underground, miners now ride a third shaft completed in 2022, dropping more than 3,150 feet, over half a mile beneath the desert floor into a maze of tunnels that wind for miles under the same hills Knight and Chase once walked with nothing but a pick and a claim map. At one heading, a jumbo drill grinds dozens of precise holes into the rock face in a tight grid, prepping it for the next blast. It's slow, deliberate, engineered work, using a long-life underground mining method called cut and fill. Nothing like the underhand digging that opened this ground in the 1930s. Ore is broken loose, hauled by increasingly autonomous trucks, and mapped with satellite and AI-driven geology models that would have meant nothing at all to the men who first staked this claim. More than half the water used to process it gets recycled straight back into the operation. Remember that dirt turnoff with no sign? This is what it's actually sitting on top of. Nevada as a whole now produces more gold than every country on Earth except a small handful of nations, China, Russia, Australia, which makes it, without much competition, America's gold capital. This one complex is a major reason why. Zoom out to the whole Nevada Gold Mines joint venture, which also runs the nearby Carlin and Cortez complexes alongside Turquoise Ridge, and the scale gets almost hard to picture. Well over 1.5 million attributable ounces of gold a year out of a stretch of desert most Americans couldn't find on a map. And here's the number that matters most. In 2025, Barrick's 61.5% share of Turquoise Ridge alone produced 341,000 ounces of gold. A site record, up from 304,000 ounces the year before as the underground operation moved into a higher grade zone. And that's Barrick's slice alone. It doesn't include Newmont's share of the very same ground. None of this stays inside Nevada either. Gold refined from complexes like this one ends up in bank vaults, in the tiny gold-plated contacts inside your phone and laptop, and in wedding rings sold across the country. There's a real chance a piece of jewelry sitting in your own house started out as rock blasted loose a half mile under this ridge. Central banks have also been buying gold at a record pace, which is part of why it's become one of the assets people lean on when they're nervous about everything else. Over the past year alone, the price of gold has climbed more than 60%, making anyone who owns it, even quietly inside a retirement account, richer without lifting a finger. A mountain range in the middle of nowhere in Humboldt County is in a strange way connected to your 401k. So what does billion dollar actually mean here? In 2025 alone, Barrick's share of this one complex pulled 341,000 ounces of gold out of the ground. At today's price of roughly $4,000 an ounce, that's somewhere around $1.3 to $1.4 billion from one company's cut of one mountain in a single year. Zoom out further and it gets bigger. This deposit had already produced roughly 6.8 million ounces since underground mining began, and it's kept climbing every year since. At today's price, That puts the total gold pulled from under this one ridge somewhere north of $25 billion, most of it out of a place most people driving past have never even heard of. And the Americas part of the title isn't just filler either. This deposit was found by American prospectors, bankrolled by American financiers, and it's mined today by an American workforce inside the single state that produces more gold than any other in the country, and more than almost any other nation on Earth. That's the other half of the title. Hidden isn't an exaggeration here, and it isn't just a figure of speech either. This gold sat under working ranch land for more than a century, dismissed twice by people who had every reason to keep looking, once as a low-grade outcrop not worth a shovel, and again as confirmed ore that was simply too metallurgically difficult to bother with. It wasn't hiding because nobody looked. It was hiding because, until 1989, there was no chemistry on Earth that could reach it. It only stopped being hidden the moment technology, not luck, finally caught up to the rock. The story isn't finished either. Barrick and Newmont are still drilling extensions off the Turquoise Ridge fault zone in the Vista underground, chasing the same structure deeper and further along strike, while nearby exploration works to extend the Getchell trend even further north. Through the back half of 2025, the underground operation was already producing more ore at higher grades, quarter over quarter, as crews push deeper into a newly accessed high-grade zone, and engineers expect that trend to keep climbing before it levels off. In its most recent reserve report, Barrick added more than 1.5 million ounces of new gold reserves across its Nevada growth projects, including Turquoise Ridge, even after a full year of mining had already depleted the ground ahead of it. Production guidance for the wider joint venture heading through 2026 points higher, not lower, and the current mine plan now stretches out toward 2050. Nobody involved is treating this as a mine winding down. They're treating it as a deposit that keeps getting bigger every time they look closer at it. Drive past that same dirt turnoff today and it still looks like nothing. Sagebrush, a fence line, no sign. Exactly like it did in 1880, exactly like it did in 1933. But underneath it, a claim that failed twice, once for a rancher who filled in his own pit and walked away, once for engineers who knew exactly what they had but couldn't touch it, is now pulling well over $1 billion a year out of the ground, with reserves still growing every year. Geologists look closer. The gold under Turquoise Ridge was never really hidden. Nobody had built the machine yet that could see it. If you want more stories like this, things hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closer, this is Geoscope. Subscribe.